Good evening. This is Mason Winfield, one of the founders of Spirit Way Project. Spirit Way Project is a research and sort of an archive association. Our goal is to preserve mostly what people say and believe about subjects of the spiritual, the supernatural, the sacred, and the paranormal. Where do you draw the line between what's sacred, what's spiritual? Where do you draw the line between what's supernatural, what's paranormal? These categories are tough. So tonight, my dear friend and co-founder Mike Bastine and I are going to be discussing Bigfoot. And this episode should be titled Bigfoot Part 1. Mike, would you like to say a little hi?
Sure. Greetings to everyone. And the Bigfoot subject it's pretty interesting. It does have roots in the native traditions, and actually there is a tie-in to, I know one of the other subjects were false faces, but this goes back to a part of history that the native people have, which says this occurred before the humans were on the planet. And there was a group of beings that were working on kind of setting the whole kind of environmental system in place. And they could communicate. These beings were referred to as stone giants. And these stone giants were really massive beings. You would almost think they were from the dinosaur age, but they were not reptilian. They were more of the human type of a life form, but they had connections that the Creator had given them to access readily a lot of the life forces and the natural forces in nature. So they say that the stone giants were doing this work to establish how to put energies in place and get things to start to work to synchronize and harmonize and work together. So that was their job. Well, one of the stone giants, decided he would venture beyond what was instructed, what they should have been doing. And instead of using these forces to produce positive outcomes and do good things, he was using them to kind of show off, to show that he had a direct connection to utilize these forces, but he was just doing it for kind of like entertainment. And he started to demonstrate what he could do with these forces with the other stone giants. And he got so good at it, he decided he would ask the Creator come down and witness what he was doing. So the Creator came down and he says, "What is it?" He says, "I'm really busy." He says, "But you called," and he says, I want to see what you want to show me." So he would say, "Turn around and close your eyes." And the Creator would turn around and close his eyes, and this guy would just go into these chants, and he would summon these elements, and all of a sudden the wind would pick up, and then there would be rumbling, and then massive lightning and thunder, and the winds would get so strong. And it took him probably an hour to get this to go, but after he was done, he told the Creator, "Take a look." And the Creator turned around, and all the trees were leveled flat. And he said, "Wow," he goes, "You really are, that's impressive." And so he said, "I'm just beginning." He says, "Let me show you the next one." And so he turned around, he said, "Close your eyes again." took him a little bit more, and he goes, did the chants, and he got this energy going, and all of a sudden the ground started to shake really hard, and it took him, he kept working, but he got his little demonstration done, and he told the creator, he said, now take a look again, and he had made the ground split wide open, and the creator said, man, he goes, you really are powerful. And he goes, well, he says, I got one more to show you. He said, you see that mountain over there? And the creator said, yeah. He says, close your eyes and turn your back again. So he went through the same routine. Ground really shook hard this time. And then he told the creator, he says, now take a look. And the mountain had moved. And he said, wow, he goes, you really mastered these powers. He said, it's my turn. He says, close your eyes and turn around. And the stone giant closed his eyes, he turned around, and there was no chanting, there was no big wind, no shaking of the ground. And he said, all right. And it was just a few seconds. He told the stone giant, he says, now you take a look, turn around and take a look. And when he went to turn, the mountain was right next to him. And he bumped into it, and it twisted his nose off to the side. So they say in the traditions of the false face that is a representation, that this was the story behind how this false face got its reputation, that it's the most powerful false face of all. But the creator then told the stone giant, he said, because of what you've done with these powers, I'm going to remove all of the stone giants. He says, this isn't the way I wanted it to go. And that stone giant realized he had made some major mistakes using his power that way. So he made a deal with the creator. He said, he said, don't blame all the other stone giants for what I did. He said, but if you let us stay, I'll promise you, we will never abuse these powers, and we will only use them for the good of the people that are coming and for the earth. He said, we won't ever do those things again. And the creator told him, he says, you made the deal? He said, I'm going to hold you to that. He said, so that's the legend of the Bigfoot, that they're still here with us, but they will never interfere with the human's life or destroy any part of the earth. They're there to protect certain areas, but they still have connection to those powers.
You know, that's a pretty good explanation. I mean, not only a great story, but that's a pretty good explanation for the behavior of the Bigfoot that so many people report. I mean, from my perspective as pretty much of a supernatural folklorist, a Bigfoot almost answers the definition of a ghost. It's like, what's a ghost? It's a supernatural apparition. Yes, people see it. They don't see it for very long. Sometimes they think they take films and photographs of them, but at the end of the day, the thing is reported. It doesn't stay very long. It vanishes. Nobody can catch one. Nobody can put one in a cage. And it very seldom leaves any trace of itself. We live in Western New York. We're, both of us travel a lot, but upstate New York has a very active local folklore on Bigfoot, this giant, hairy, man-like creature. There are a couple of known zones, for want of a better word, where you tend to see a lot of Bigfoot. Or, well, am I saying I do? You ever seen one?
I've never seen one, but one time, Mad Bear and I went out to the Wasatch Mountain Range in Utah, and we went to a resort area called Snowbird, And some of the gathering, some of the people there had asked Mad Bear, can we go and try to experience contact with a Sasquatch? And Mad Bear said, we can try. But he said, they're really shy. And they don't want to be just seen or experienced just for that sake, to be seen or experienced. He said, if we were typically going to do this, to interact, we would have to have a ceremony. But he says, if we were just going to go out and maybe have some type of interaction, we can do that. He said, but I'm not going to go into any kind of sacred approach to this, only because he says it's more of just going out and seeing what happens. So he didn't want to, because to do the next level, there has to be a purpose. What would be your reason? Other than just you want to see them. He goes, that's not what we do.
Well, that's, in a way, in a nutshell, that's a big difference between a witch and a medicine person. The witch would use the powers they have selfishly, possibly to cause harm, and the medicine person would use them to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And if there isn't a really good purpose other than making a spectacle, that wouldn't have been Mad Bear's game.
Right.
Mike, have you heard that Allegheny State Park is a prominent region for Bigfoot sightings?
I've heard there's been sightings. The people, though, that report this, a lot of times, if they're medicine people, they don't report it. Because to them, this is, it's not a spectacle. It's not something for the entertainment, because as soon as that word would get out, people will go down just for the sake of, to see something of an unusual, but that's not unusual. They have a purpose. According to the legends and the teachings that are handed down, you may want to go out and meditate out there and say, my purpose would be purely educational or insightful, and we believe that you have something that we can share.
Do you think Bigfoot in native tradition, do you think it's physical? Is it material?
It actually, what I have heard is that they are, they're interdimensional. They're almost like the little people, but on a different scale. It's from a different time in the evolution of the earth. That, and to try to get things clear for people to understand. There's not a division between groups of people who believe in evolution and people who believe in creation. The best that I've heard, which I didn't really hear literally, but I heard on another level from Mad Bear, which was, what's wrong with a creation that has the intelligence and the ability to evolve? So you start to see that at some point there is some form of a creation, but on the other hand, that element of evolving is very intellectual. It's very high functioning. That says in order for us to continue to stay in existence, we have to adapt and change to our future.
Were you aware of the strong study that's been done of the coincidence of Bigfoot sightings with UFO sightings?
Yes.
Stan Gordon.
Yeah.
Do you know him?
I've met him. Yeah.
Yeah, he did a wonderful talk locally within the last 10 years at Niagara University. But Stan has made a much more organized study of the overlap between Bigfoot sightings reports and UFO sightings and reports. He's made a much more diligent study of that than I have with my material mostly. upstate ghost stories. But Stan believes there's a major connection between Bigfoot sightings and UFO sightings. Now, part of the reason I brought this up was because if it's interdimensional as a being, that's probably the way the UFOs travel. They're not doing it with motors and jet engines.
Yeah, it's not just one component of that field, because there's multiple levels. So in order to go into these other dimensions or these other levels of existence, the individuals or the beings that can or need to do that are functioning on a much different level. And the system that we're so familiar with, it functions on such a low level. And that's why there's avoidance by these other beings or these other elements of making a spectacle of themselves, because the system doesn't understand their existence or their purpose, and they're waiting for the humans to evolve, to snap out of their... and unfortunately, a lot of our experiences with the system we're in today, it intentionally tries to hold the elements of higher function, holding the humans down. And they look at those things with I guess they want to see a spectacle. They want to see I guess a reference that I always look at: the day before Christ walked on water, he didn't go around telling people, if you want to see something really incredible tomorrow, come on down to the water's edge. And he didn't do it. It just was whether he knew in advance, it was a spontaneous and a thing that needed to be done to show other people this is what can be achieved if you live your life in a manner which understands higher function. And the purpose of it is not to show off or to make a spectacle. The purpose is to demonstrate we all have this ability.
Well, if the Bigfoot that people see is not a biologically natural being, because in Western New York, I don't see how it could be. There's no place for them to breed, no place for them to really live where they're hidden, not much for them to eat.
Well, they're like little people, and the little people do the same functions in life, but without being integrated into the lower functioning mass of the population.
Here's what I sort of wanted to get at. A lot of times when I interview people, and there are always going to be non-native people, there'll always be, people of a European ancestry or an African, or, but they're not native people. They'll be out in the woods and they'll see something. It'll terrify them. And sometimes they'll see a Bigfoot and that terrifies them. And sometimes they'll see other crazy forms, like gutted deer walking on their hind legs and waving their front. They'll just see crazy forms. And when I interview them and really ask them, where were you? Very often, they'll tell me that they were in a certain place that I could have said, well, the elders don't want you there, like a high hill.
Mm-hmm. Well, I believe that the little people and Bigfoot both can reside in places that might be referred to as a vortex or vortices, where energy lines may intersect or grids may exist, and they're not constant. They won't stay in that position fixed. They're variable. Are they variable because of the other elements around or alignments in the cosmos? Or is it something that interacts with the beings that reside there? And they say, it's all right, let's get this vortex active. Let's go through the portal. Let's retrieve or do what we need from that physical dimension and interact, because it really is an exchange of energy.
Well, some of these horrifying apparitions, I mean, you'd have to admit that, like an 8-foot gorilla out in the middle of the woods would be a little intimidating. A lot of people who see these things, apparitions that scare them, are in the wrong place. I often think that if you're transgressing on a holy site to the people that owned this land before we got here, my guys got here, if you're in a place that's got a force that doesn't want to be disturbed, the kindest thing that can happen is for somebody to just flicker up an apparition like a booby trap or a warning that would scare people off.
Right. And that's what it typically happens is instead of welcoming more people to visit that place, they say, we don't want them to go back and say, hey, come here, I want to take you to this location and witness what I witnessed. Because they're saying they're not ready. They're only looking at it from their low, well, let's capture one, we'll put it in like the zoo, and we'll sell tickets for people to come and take a look. And it's just a violation.
They'd either put it in the zoo or Alabama would recruit it to play offensive tackle, Hey, we really will have to come back to this subject again. Right. I think we're just scratching the surface. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us for this segment of the Spirit Way Project, Dialogues with Mason and Mike. We talked about Bigfoot tonight. It's our first episode with Bigfoot. I'm sure we'll talk about the guy again. Thanks for joining us tonight.